Everyone, thank you for joining the free training series on Manage Engine Applications Manager. This is the agenda for today. We'll start with monitoring your Java, Node.js, PHP, and .NET Core applications. Then we'll be moving on monitoring the critical transactions for your application, which is spread in a distributed systems. And we'll be also focusing on deriving the code stack through thread profiling. Finally, setting up the alerts for critical performance parameters of your application. This is going to be the agenda. Throughout this webinar, we do have our expert panelists available to answer all your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the webinar chat panel so that you can get it answered from our expert panelist. Without much ado, we can start. Gaining deep visibility into Java, Node.js, PHP, and .NET Core applications. Before we start with the monitoring of your application, let's understand the importance for the need for IT teams to have connections to the business. As we all know that most of the countries have already started facing third wave or fourth wave of this pandemic again. So owing to this situation, most of the applications, again, the challenges have been focused to the monitoring teams because maintaining connectivity to the offshore teams and collaborating with multiple systems or multiple stakeholders is definitely a challenging part. So all these teams needs to be in a single phase so that they can streamline the monitoring across the multiple systems. So monitoring the service health, understanding the impact of the applications for the end users is again a key aspect, and this definitely acts as a challenge for the teams. Managing the applications from remote sites. So there are multiple factors while establishing a connection with a remote site like VPN bandwidth, network level latency, there could be a service provider level latency. All these where needs to be addressed in a very efficient way so that you can ensure your applications being monitored 24/7 without impacting the brand reputation, and also you can ensure the end user experience is always in a very high level. So let's see the common reasons your application might be slow. As we know that the application is not a single component, this is a multiple components being tied together to keep your applications up and running. Various components like web server, application server, and app code inside resides inside your specific component, which in fact use the memory components, right? And also third-party APIs. All these components should be optimally performing so that the end user experience can be protected. So let's start with the web server. A web server might be overloaded, which cause slowness to your application, misconfigurations due to a load balancer, out of memory exceptions occurring due to a buggy code, and memory leak due to a high number of threads usage, and a DB call, which is causing a performance impact to a specific transaction, and most importantly, the buggy application code, which is completely responsible for your application slowness. Slow method calls or slow third-party API systems, all these were impacting your application, which caused slowness. In the today's session, we will be focusing on how to overcome these problems using Applications Manager. In order to overcome these problems, one need to troubleshoot. Let's see the traditional way of troubleshooting the application performance monitoring. Let's assume that we receive an complaint from the end user saying that the specific transaction is affected and they were not able to perform the transaction or the application is slow. The IT help desk team gather the sufficient information from the user, like they gather logs, they try to understand the issue by gathering the required screenshot, and then they try to analyze. And for the next level of analysis, it will be again pushed to the developers or the DBAs or the DevOps. So they again analyze using the logs. If they were able to reproduce the issue, they build a fix. If they were unable to reproduce the issue, their analysis again goes on, and this is a time-consuming approach. That is, four-step processes involved: reproducing the issue, analyzing the logs, and comparing the logs with the app code, and finally building a fix and test the fix and deliver it to the user. By this time, the end user experience is completely impacted. Thus, the user may not be happy with the performance of the application, which impacts the brand reputation. And this process consumes high MTTR, that is high mean time to time repair ratio. When an issue is reported, how much time it takes for the issue to be resolved. So high MTTR for this kind of troubleshooting. Let's see the modern way of troubleshooting this kind of issues using an automated application performance monitoring APM insight solution. So all these efforts can be automated, and how you can directly focus on resolving the problem and ensure that you deliver a rich set of user experience for your users. So when we talk about the modern approach using the APM insight, there are four key parameters involved. That is AppDex score, which is application performance index score, and average response time of your application, and throughput, and errors count. These were the four primary indicators of your application. So let me take you to the product GUI and show you how you can get started with this. And you can also follow with me in case if any of the users wanted to download APM Insight, you could also follow with me. I'll be giving you a live demonstration on how to set up this. So let me switch back to the product GUI. In order to set up the application performance monitoring, two things needs to be performed as a prerequisite. Applications Manager should be installed. This is for a new users. If any of our existing users have already joined the session, then you would have already installed the Applications Manager. All you have to do is download and set up the APM Insight. So this is going to be the GUI. So when we click the APM Insight, you could see the list of applications being monitored. And for this demonstration purpose, I'll take a Node.js application as an example, and this is what we'll be focusing in the today's session. So we support Express framework of the Node.js. And in the previous slide, we have discussed about AppDex, average response time, throughput, request count, and errors. So this page acts as a single dashboard where you can get complete set of information which is required for your application. AppDex is again split into three different types, that is satisfied, tolerating, and frustrated. Satisfied count, which is a direct measure of the end user happiness rating, that is the whoever are satisfied with the performance of your applications will be treated in this category, and tolerating this 0.1%, frustrated with the performance of your application, so on so. This AppDex score acts as a single point of SLA for your application performance monitoring. And average response time, whenever a user send a request, how they send a request? They access the URL, the website from your browser, and they make a request, post, or get whatsoever. This request is again transmitted in the form of packets, and this reach the web server. Web server understand the request and deliver back the content requested by the users. So this, in the network level, the time taken between the user to the web server, that is treated as a round trip time in the form of packets, wherein you could analyze the network level issues. This session is completely on the application side, wherein if there is an issue with the web server, what if there is an issue with the application code? What if there is an issue with the database? How to understand that? So this APM Insight gives you those data. So we will show you the request count, how many requests that this web server is receiving, whatsoever the web server, IIS, Apache, JBoss. So all those information will be shown right here. Exceptions, that is unhandled exceptions happening in your application code, will be shown under exceptions category. And request or response time broken by its component. Application consists of multiple components, that is HTTP call is involved. This HTTP call goes to the app code, and again via the app code a database call is performed. So you can completely understand the components and the response time split up of your app component right here using this dashboard. And request throughput, data throughput, bytes in and bytes out happening via this application. One of the most important aspect in terms of monitoring. And exceptions count. Warning and fatal exception. Fatal exception needs immediate attention by the developers or the stakeholders. And errors. How many number of errors? Minimum, maximum, average, and 95th percentile value will be shown right here very clearly along with the graphical data. Split up by exception. So there are multiple types of exception would occur inside your apps. That either that could be an out of memory exception, file not found exception, or any type of exception it is. This agent captures all these transaction exception and show you right here along with the split up based on its frequency. Top 5 transaction based on response time and top 5 slow traces through which you can easily identify, yes, these are all the transactions where user were not happy because the response time is very high, which is why it is listed in the top 5 slow traces category. And exception traces. So these are all the exceptions which is occurring, and this is already sorted based on its frequency. That is, it is sorted based on descending, and one can click the trace and can find in which transaction this error has occurred, and you could get the complete stack trace. I'll show you in the upcoming presentation, and I'll give you a live session also. So let's see how you can set up this APM Insight. Just choose this APM Insight tab right here. You will be taken to this page wherein you just have to click download and install the APM Insight agent on the application server. Choose this option. Upon choosing this option, you will be taken to our website wherein you can download the agent based upon your application environments. We support Java, .NET, Ruby on Rails, Node.js, PHP, .NET Core based applications. So for the demonstration purpose, I'll be using the Node.js agent. I have an Node.js application built in my system, and let's see how we can set up this. So all you have to do is download this agent. After downloading this agent, move this agent zip file to your application server, which means where your Node.js is installed. Move the agent to that system, and then you can follow my instructions one by one. Upon moving the Node.js agent, let's see how you can install the APM Insight Node.js agent. To get started, you need a license key which needs to be obtained from the APM Insight page of the application manager itself. So how you can obtain the license key? Let me show you. Go to the same APM Insight tab right here. And here in the step 2 page, you can find the license key. Here you could find the license key. Since I'm using a demonstration site, this is not shown. In your installation, you could very well view the license key. Copy this license key and keep it with you in a very safe place. Now, open your Node.js application. So I already have my Node.js application in this directory. Now access the Node Packet Manager npm. Using the following command, you can install. That is npm space install space the path of the agent. Say for example, this agent is in this directory. So all you have to do is npm install along with the complete directory of this agent, which looks something like this. And if you want to install agent in multiple locations, then you can specify a global option -g flag can be used. Once after executing this command, this will create APM Insight directory under node underscore modules. In your application directory, you will be already finding this node underscore modules under which you can find the APM Insight. Right here, you can find the APM Insight. So after installation, you will find this folder. This indicates that the installation is successful. Hope this is clear with the participants. Let me know if you have any questions so that you can get it answered right here. This is a two-step process. That is installing the application, that is installing the agent to talk with your application. That is step one. So we have completed that. Step two is once the agent collects the data, it needs to push the data to the applications manager. So for that, let me show you how to do that. We have completed the step one process by using this npm command, and we have unzipped it. Let's see the step two command. So all you have to do is copy this line, this complete set of parameters, and add to the first line of your Node.js application source code. And all you need to ensure is whenever you start your application, this source code should be called. This is the key important aspect, because based on this, the APM Insight Node.js agent will push the data to the applications manager so that you can view all the set of information required for troubleshooting of your performance. And this is how it needs to be. So let me give you a live example. Let me go to my application. So app is the file which I use to start my application. So app.js. As you could see, I have already added this line on top of this app.js. So here, initially I have mentioned to copy the license key. The same license key, you just have to paste it, and this license key varies based on every installation. Every installation contains a unique license key, so please make sure that you contain the license key from the installation where you would like to view the data. And the app name, this app name you can uh, name it as per your phone requirements. Based on this app name, the application will be created in the application manager using this name which you have specified, and the port number of your application. And APM host, since I have installed the application manager in the local machine, I have given local host. If it is a different machine, you could specify its host name or its IP address. And the APM port is nothing but the SSL port. So this is a very important aspect for all the IT teams. APM uses two ports, 9090 as a HTTP web server port and 8443 as an HTTPS secured SSL port. So since we communicate to the application manager via a secure channel, considering the security reasons, we use 8443. In case if you are using any other port 443 or something, you could mention those right here. In case if you are not sure what's your port number is, you can go to the application manager installation, open the aim server.properties under the conf location, wherein you can find this port number and paste it right here. After this, restart your application and you are good to go. The agent collects the data and it communicates the collected data to the application manager GUI from where you can get started. All right. So hope this installation process is clear and this is pretty straightforward. In case if any of the users needs a custom setup or any technical clarifications, please feel free to type in the chat panel. We will proactively reach to you for any technical assistance. So now let me switch back to the presentation. So now we have discussed about setting up the APM Insight installation is what we have discussed. Now let's see how you can track the distributed tracing in a microservice-based environments. When we talk about microservice-based environments, it's not a single component again. So on the right-hand side, I have given a traditional simple component example. That is, you have a JVM, and this JVM outputs the log file to a specific location, and you have an APM solution which take the log file analysis and gives you a very simple way of monitoring just by analyzing the log file. Now consider the modern approach in the left-hand side, wherein you have deployed a Kubernetes cluster and there are multiple nodes. One node is for a Node.js and multiple parts were associated to that as well. So one node is Node.js, other is PHP, and other is Java, and other node is for a SQL. So all these were separate images or separate components. All these were outputting the log files to a different locations, which is a challenging factor in case if there is a performance issues arising, how one can analyzing, because Java is outputting the log file to a different location, SQL is outputting the log file to a different location. Correlation will be missing. In order to overcome this, an efficient business observability solution like APM Insight is required, which collects the data and correlates this data based on the service request or the transaction performed by the user. It monitors the data and it analyzes the data. Historical data analysis is performed, wherein you could get the 95th percentile historical minimum data, maximum data, average data of your application performance. Finally, build a fix for the performance. So this is going to be the simple approach and which will help to resolve the issues quickly. So let's focus on that. So I have mentioned an example previously that setting up a Node.js, multiple clusters were involved, and each will be hosting a multiple set of components responsible for your application, right? So in this case, multiple set of clusters were involved, which is in one node, you have one IPs in a one node, other component is in a different IP. So this is a distributed transaction tracing. A user is performing, but in the backend, the request goes to multiple servers. And there might be an latency between transferring the request or the path this request takes from one server to other server. So you need to focus on the execution flow so that you can completely understand the journey of the entire request across multiple tier web systems. This our APM Insight agent adds an HTTP header containing the metadata which is required to track the request so that the agent can easily track the request whenever it goes to multiple nodes. So it helps the IT monitoring teams to understand whatsoever component microservice based systems you're using. You get a correlative central data through which you can track the request very easily on a single click. So you could also, as I was talking, track the transactions made from one application to another, from one node to another. how it goes, and what are all the method involved when a primary method is called. And you could also find SQL calls based on those. You could refine the business transactions. So what do we mean by refining the business transactions? When we talk with any IT teams, they usually say, not all the transactions needs monitoring. I just need to ensure that this transaction alone needs to be ensured at least for my critical workflow to happen. Those cases can be easily configured by using key transactions. So the stakeholders or the business team understand the key operations in your application, configure those as a key transaction, understand the customer experience and the app deck score for those transactions. If there is any issues, get the stack trace, find the issues, get it resolved. So now let me show you the GUI the same. Let me go back to the same application. This transactions tab will help you to capture all the transactions happening in your web application based on the sampling factor you are defining. So here is the option called configure key transactions. Upon choosing these options, all the primary transactions will be listed. You can also search the specific transactions based upon your requirements. Choose those and make it as a save transactions. And then you could find those as a key transactions and get the historical data, app deck score, count, errors, average response time, average CPU time, bytes in and bytes out information in a very clear scale. You can also click this transaction and find the request time, response time, CPU time, external calls for this transaction, exceptions count if there is any will be listed. SQL time, that is the time taken from the database side, will be shown right here. Distributed calls count. If it's a distributed transaction traces, you can also find the distributed information. Response time broken by its component. That is, app code is how much, and SQL database time is how much, and overall consolidated response time, you could also find it right here. And request throughput, data throughput for this transaction, bytes in and bytes out for this transaction, along with its min, max, and average 95th percentile value for the same shown very clearly. If there is any background transactions in your application, there are wide variety of background transactions will be running in your application without the call from an end user. End user doesn't make the transaction, but still your application is holding the workload of this transaction. And it is important to understand this kind of transactions performance also. We automatically categorize these types of transactions as a background transactions and will be shown in this background tab. By just choosing this, you can find those informations very clearly. It could be a background API request. It might be a background schedule task for generating the automatic reports and delivering it to your users. All kind of transactions will be shown very clearly right here. If there is any transaction which is containing errors, those will be treated right here. And you could find the transactions along with its name and same kind of data, minimum, maximum throughput, and request count for this transactions can be easily identified. All this application calls involves a subsequent amount of database calls, and this will be treated under the database operations monitoring. And you could find right here, a single agent captures all this data. So you don't have to set up a database monitoring separately or the trace monitoring separately. This agent collects all this information. This talks, say for, let's assume that you have a Node.js application built using Express framework, and it has a MongoDB, which is attached to your Node.js application. We automatically capture the database operations and we show you the complete query which is triggered from the code side. Yeah, when a method is called, a query is again called. We show you those queries right here along with its response time, average response time. One can say if you suspect that I have an application performance issue from because of my database. So what you need to do is sort the co- uh, database operations based on its response time. So now I have sorted based on response time by just choosing this arrow. And now you could see this is the transaction which is taking a long response time. So what query is this? It's an insert query. And in this specific table, why this is happening? So this query is happening due to an call made by the user when they choose this method. When a user is going to that page, this query is called. And this is taking time. And in fact, you can find a correlation that this SQL time for this transaction is 1.78 minutes, which is subsequently high. So this is how you can analyze. This is where the issues were happening. And most importantly, tracking the traces is important. So now we have identified the database query which is causing the CPU or the execution time is high. Now, to exactly pinpoint where the issue is rising. Previously, whenever an issue is occurring, say for example, if out of memory exception is occurring, what people do is just to ensure that the issue is not occurring again, they allocate more amount of memory to the JVM. What again happens? 1 or 2 days or 3 days, it might be operating stable. And after so and so time, again the JVM hacks up due to an out of memory exception. So again, allocating a memory is not a good idea. Now, in those cases, one needs to understand why the JVM is exhausting. What component is consuming the high CPU or high memory usage of the JVM? For that question, the answer is available under the traces tab. So you could also sort these transactions based on its response time. So I'm sorting it based on the response time right here. All the transactions for the traces will be available right here. See, now I have found that this transaction is causing 1.78 minutes to respond back to the user. Let's see why it is taking 1.78 minutes. The user cannot wait for one minute for a transaction to happen. So let's click this. We have clearly identified that there is an issue with this transaction. As you could see, 500 exception code or HTTP response code from the web server, which will definitely create an issue. Let's understand why there is an issue. So you could see that there is an query, PGSQL query is involved, and this is the method the issue is happening, and this is the query and trace details. You could find that there is 9 method calls plus 95 SQL calls were involved to complete this transaction, complete this journey. So what exactly happens? Whenever this method is called, these are all the queries being invoked and SQL time and same method and queries. So SQL statements, define these are the SQL statement. If there is any external call, say for example, this is in a different node. The database is in a different node and the application is in a different node. And the database is again split into multiple nodes. Definitely these can be treated under external calls. And you could find the other traces of these transactions which show the minimum, maximum, and 95th percentile value for the same. This is clear. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat panel. Now, let me show you what if there is an error happened and how to identify in which method the error has happened. The answer is By using the stack trace, you can easily identify this is where the issue has happened. Let me give you an example. Let's take this transaction which has an error. Let's see why this contains an error and what's the reason for this error. So there's an HTTP call from my application. This goes to a third-party API, I mean URL, and that's the shipment connect exception. This because we were unable to get the request from the external URL, and that's the shipment connect exception. There might be multiple reasons. From my application, there might be a proxy enabled, which would have blocked the connection to this URL. Subsequent amount of network level issues also. So now let's see the reason. The trace details, you would find connect exception and SQL statements if there is any. And this is the exception class. And most importantly, you can view the stack trace. So this is these data is very important for your developers to fix or understand. Okay, this is the issue because of create socket. It is unable to create socket because of the network level issue. So which doesn't mean that this transaction doesn't have any issue with the application owners. It contains an issue with the network side. So you can clearly understand why this URL is not connecting from the Node.js install machine or from the Java install machine. By fixing that, this transaction can be cleared. This is how you can optimize the end-to-end application performance monitoring. So now JVM. JVM is specifically for the Java-based performance monitoring, Java applications. You can understand the heap, non-heap memory, JVM CPU usage percentage. That is the minimum, maximum, and average value of your JVM. Heap memory, non-heap memory, and the just-in-time compiler information will be shown right here. So let me switch back to the presentation and let's continue from the business transactions. So I have given you an example about the code level invocation, that is understanding the slow method calls because by using the traces. And now let's see importance of thread profiling. So why thread profiling is required? You can actually find a specific application is causing a CPU spike. I wanted to know why this is consuming CPU spike. Then you wanted to analyze the thread profiles. You could get complete insight into the invocation count of every method, find the time consuming methods which is causing slowness to your application performance or causing CPU spike to the application performance. If CPU spike is occurring, then multiple transactions will be affected. CPU spike is definitely a challenging factor for the IT teams. So how to identify those kind of threads which is causing the CPU spike? Let me go to the GUI. Choose this thread profile right here. After choosing the thread profile, there are two types of thread profile that profiling one can do. That is on-demand thread profiling, scheduled thread profiling. If you wanted to do an on-demand thread profiling, all you have to do is just choose the profiling duration time for the profiling to happen, and then choose start profiling. The profiling will happen, and the data will be looking something similar to this. So that is the current method, CPU time, and all those information will be shown. Based on its CPU time, you can sort the specific thread or the method which is consuming CPU usage. Understanding trace again will help you to solve the issue. This is how one you can understand and perform or solve the issues. Let me switch back to the presentation. So you could get the insight into the problematic code because we show you the traces along with its HTTP code, get the complete stack trace, get the external calls information, and get the same. So now coming to the business aspects of setting up this solution. Now we have discussed about setting up the installation, discussing the key metrics. Let's see the business observability, which is capable of this APM side. You can understand the business context. Once you understand the business context, you can focus more into the new technology stack that is improving the migrating your framework from a different systems rather than focusing on or troubleshooting on your existing systems. Improve the end user experience by migrating to your new framework systems, or you could make use of APM Insight in such a way that before you deploy a new production code, and you wanted to test how this code is working or how this functionality is actually helping the users, take a note of the previous response time of the transaction, and after code push, check the response time and the AppDex score of the transaction. This is a clear indication wherein you can clearly find the difference. If the AppDex score is improved, then definitely indicates that the code push or the new code push which you have done is helping your transaction or improving the application performance. If there is an issue, you could get the trace for those transactions and find the issue. Most importantly, whenever I talk with any developers or any other IT teams, they say that we have developed a code for this functionality, but we are not sure this has affected the other functionality of our code, caused a breakage to other functionality which we haven't expected. The answer is yes. There might be some dependencies inside the code level which would have uh, caused an impact to the other transaction, though no changes to that specific method is made. So understanding these kind of transaction can be made easy with the APM Insight, wherein you could find the transactions. Okay, this is the transaction again affected, sort it and get the trace. Because focusing on customer is most important, because average cost of an application downtime or the network downtime is around 6,500, $5,600 per minute for as per the Gartner. So it's not only based on the revenue. During the pandemic, most of the applications, most of the teams were digitalizing every records of the patients or every records of finance applications needs high level of confidentiality, and service level agreement should be on top. So automating, building a business context, and finally building an action is very much important, which can be made easy using the APM Insight. Now, let's see the final topic for today, setting up alerts for critical performance parameters. Why there is a need of alert? Why an alert is required? The answer is, say the application is running out of memory, or the application hangs up due to an slow memory usage. If you understand, if you get an alert before it actually goes to the dead state, you could actually find, yes, now I got a warning alert saying that my application has exhausted 70% of the memory till 30% of memory is left. In this case, you can just go ahead and find and fix the issues. Instead of an user is reporting, again, understanding the context, troubleshooting, building a fix, it's again a time consuming factor. That's why an alerting, proactive alerting is required. Not only alerting, APM Insight using the Manage Engine Application Manager, you can receive an alert, build an correlative automation and orchestration activities using the same alert. One and automated tickets can be created based on its issue, build of action. I'll explain that in the upcoming slides. You could get the application errors based on its count. So there is a filter, one can enable it, based on which the exceptions will be shown. And top exceptions will be shown. Not only the errors or exceptions, analyzing the historical data is very much important to understand the application performance for a subsequent period of time. That is availability, response time, AppDex, and other components like runtime free memory and runtime total memory. Runtime free memory is very much important because during its runtime, how much free memory is present. Based on its free memory only, it can perform if there's a surge in new transactions. So setting up an alert for runtime free memory is crucial, and availability and AppDex score were key components. So as I was talking about the automations, the tool will send you a proactive notification saying that your application is going to exhaust out of memory, or it is going to have so and so many errors, or CPU usage is high, CPU usage for the JVM. In those cases, tool itself capable of performing an automation activities on behalf of the IT admins. There are multiple type of automations that can be performed. A simple automation is creating a tickets to the service now or the service displays. The tool itself creates a ticket assigned to a technician, raise the severity. Based on its, say, for example, if the issue is resolved within 2 minutes, the tool itself is capable of closing the tickets or updating the ticket with the notes. These kind of automations, you can create a wide variety of custom incidents using our ticketing actions. You could get all these alerts automatically pushed to your Slack notification, to which you could get the combined information of multiple alerts. SQL job-based automation, you could automatically stop based on a specific job alert. Start a job. Say, for example, if the DB side you have noticed an issue and you wanted to perform a DBCC command or for maintenance. In those case, very well you could create a job, and based on when the application manager notices an alert, it automatically calls the job. It automatically start the job. As a result, the remediation action is performed. And not only that, there are few other automations like getting a thread dump or performing an automated garbage collection based on the collected objects count. The tool itself capable of performing an automated garbage collection, and it is capable of triggering a heap dump. It is capable of triggering a thread dump as well. I'll show you the GUI for the users. So almost since we have come to the end of the session, before we discuss about the takeaway, I'll give you an options about the automation. So since we have discussed about the various types of automations, we have like sending an email, SMS were common, and sending an SNMP based traps. And apart from that, Java heap dump. If you are monitoring a Java based application using APM inside, using this option, you can perform these three actions: thread dump, heap dump, perform garbage collection. Based on it, you can select the JRE, in which the tool itself is capable of auto selecting the JRE based on an alarm. However, if you wanted to make sure that you wanted to trigger an garbage collection based on a specific JRE based on its alarm, you could very well customize those by using a specific host option. Choose the host. Once the JVM action is completed, you will automatically receive an email saying that this action has been completed, so that you can just relax and ensure that your application is performing optimally. So this is a very important or efficient functionality which will help the users a lot. And configuring the alarms. By just choosing configure alarms right here, choose the monitor type here as APM Insight. So this is a global option. Say if you have hundreds of applications, by just configuring right here, all you could configure alarms for all the applications in a single shot. And there is an option to configure applications wise separately as well. Runtime configuring alarms for runtime free memory, associate their threshold. Threshold is the uh, component which is based on its value, alert will be raised. So understand your historical data, define the threshold. If you're not sure on what value you have to keep, say because you're not sure of how much runtime free memory value I need to set as a threshold, go to the reports, understand the threshold. I mean, understand the historical values. Say, let me show you. I'll just choose the application servers right here. I'm choosing the APM Insight. So let's take any one of the metric so that we can see runtime free memory. So since it's a demonstration side, I didn't have the data, but once you understand the free memory component, you can add plus or minus value to it, a minor plus or minus value, and define a threshold through which you could get a proactive alerts and perform various type of automations that I have defined right here. Let me switch back to the GUI. So we have come to the end of this session, and we do have a question and answer session coming up. I request the users to stay online. So we have discussed about application performance monitoring for your production grade Node.js application, and discussed about the transaction traces in the microservice-based systems, historical application performance data with the automations for your applications is what we have discussed. Thank you.